via Zoom to catch up with tennis commentator, in fact sports commentator extraordinaire. His name is David Basheer. He's been a long-time contributor for The Informer and he joins us again. David, the Australian Open has been run and won, as they say. It's finished. What did you make of it? What was the fallout?
I think, George, overall, it was a successful tournament given the fact that we hadn't expected it to go ahead in the months prior. And I think when we had the hiccup with the the quarantine hotels and all the concerns around that, and a lot of the Victorians felt that they were being disadvantaged by potentially having infectors come into Melbourne and potentially spreading the virus to have another lockdown situation. So once they got over that, fears were allayed and the players actually got on court and they played the build-up tournament to the Australian Open. I think people were relieved that they could get an international event up and running, or six it was in 1 week before the Australian Open. And then once the Open got underway, there was less anxiety about the tennis. Obviously, you still have sections of the community that thought it was totally unnecessary. But I think overall it was a success given the parameters of expectation before the tournament.
Now, you called a number of games throughout the tournament. What did you make of it from your perspective? Did you like the tennis that was on show? Did you get to understand that Craig Tiley and his team did as good a job as was expected, and you were delighted to be there? Because I saw you smiling, especially with Johnny Fitzgerald and Roger Rashid. The three amigos. You had a lot of fun throughout the tournament.
Yeah, it was great to see them again, George. And you've been in the media a long time. When you don't see your colleagues for a while and you come back to a common ground, it can be very enjoyable. But I think from Craig Tiley's point of view, I think he did everything possible. I don't think, bar the early recalcitrance, we heard much negative comment about Craig Tiley. I think he tried to move heaven and earth to get the players what they wanted. He tried to negotiate very tricky waters with biosecurity with the Victorian government. And the players in the end all respected the fact that Australia has the highest standards of biosecurity in the world. And that's why it's such a safe place. So I think they all left Melbourne with a greater appreciation of what was done for them and how privileged they were to be playing in a Grand Slam tournament.
Did you think that some of the other world tournaments that are coming up, the French, the Wimbledon and the US, might take a leaf or two from the Australian experience? Because we had a number of international correspondents, and I'm sure they're going to take this IP back to their respective federations.
Absolutely, and some of the commentators that I was calling with work also for Tennis Australia, and they were saying there's already that type of intel being shared between the majors, the Grand Slams, because obviously we're an island and it suits us to have a bubble here because we can push the rest of the world out. It's a lot more difficult in Europe and North America, as you know, but they can learn a lot from what Australia does, and they certainly will be going to school on it. Whether it'll all be public learning, I'm not so sure, but I think there's definitely a strong line of communication behind the scenes. I hope the French Open goes ahead because I'd love to go to Roland Garros, and I think with Rafa Nadal trying to dig in and get past Roger Federer, and we know Novak now creeping up on the two major guns, it's going to be a fabulous narrative moving forward. And it's not less fabulous in the women's draw, but in the women's singles, but I think there's a different type of narrative there.
Now, on that subject, let's go to the court side. What did you make in the women's? Is this definitely the line in the sand moment when Osaka and Ash and others, Jenny Brady and so on, make this transition and move past the Williams? Or is Serena got something left?
I think her only chance personally is at Wimbledon. I can't, a fit Naomi Osaka, I can't see how she can lose to Serena again at a major event when her fitness is at peak level. I just can't see it happening.
Okay.
I think Serena had an opportunity. I don't think Serena can now shorten the points enough for her age and duration in 2 weeks of Grand Slam tennis. That's my view. And talking to a lot of coaches who've coached the top women, they are thinking very much the same. I sort of kind of hope, because I think she is the greatest women's player that's ever played the game, that she does surpass the record set by Margaret Court. But I'm not sure it's going to happen, George.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. But let's move on to the men's. There were some outstanding contributions. There was some marvellously exciting tennis played. We saw young Nick Kyrgios really show us yet again that he has a new moniker, and that moniker is Showtime. Or, you know, there's a guy in cricket named Maxwell who's called The Big Show. I'm starting to think that Nick may well be going down that pathway, and when he's on, he's absolutely must-watch television or must-watch tennis. Can't say the same for a number of others, but I was enthralled by that game that he played that mesmerised me. I never imagined he was going to do what he did, and then, of course, when he fell over, he again surprised us. So it's quite something, isn't it?
Yeah, those two 5-setters against Ugo Humbert, who I had the privilege of calling that match with Wally Masur, and we were just startled by the standard of tennis and the way he could turn that match around. It was staggering. And you're right, he's complete Showtime. Like, if you take away his personality, you take away what he does off the court and some of the things he says, if he's on the court and he's on, I'm staggered to think of a more entertaining tennis player I've ever seen in my life. My memory even goes back, hence the grey beard, George. I can remember watching Ilie Nastase play.
Oh.
Now, exactly.
He was Henri Leconte. When Leconte was playing and he had that tennis racket looking like a swashbuckling rapier, that was super scintillating tennis to watch, wasn't it?
Yeah. I think for pure unpredictability, I think Nastase was the player for me. I think Henri Leconte was a master stroke maker. I think he was such a creative player that he was just compelling to watch when he was on. But you roll those two guys in with a lot more bling, and you've got Nick Kyrgios, and he is such an entertaining tennis player to watch. But I think there is no doubt, and I've said this before to you many times, that if he ever got fit enough, if he ever got hard enough to play 2 weeks of Grand Slam tennis, he could roll all that entertainment into a GS win. And that's what people are after. We want to see him do that deep into the second week of a Grand Slam, because he's too great a talent to not win a Grand Slam by the end of his career.
Look, I can't argue with anything you said, and I pray for that day, but I also see this game evolving. There are so many people we bring onto the tennis court now, so many people to advance your game, to change your thinking. The only thing we haven't got on the court is someone we can pay to let us win to advance us into the second week. I mean, that just doesn't exist at the moment, but should that ever occur, then I think then we've got to get Nick into that second week of tennis, because hang on, here's a question for you without notice. Could Craig Tiley give him a wild card in the second round?
Look,
the second week.
If he could buy the ticket you're talking about, George, I reckon he'd be in the queue right now, wouldn't he?
Okay, yeah. Okay, let's not discount now the contribution of the champion, Djokovic. I've never rated him as a person, but I must say his tennis is exemplary. It's very, very special, and it has to be to win not only one tournament, but what is it now, 9 Australian Opens?
Yeah, it's incredible. His level against Medvedev had a chance. If Medvedev was at his premium game and Djokovic was a rung down, then Daniil Medvedev had a real chance to beat him. And all the markets and the experts said exactly that. They were almost split down the middle. I think there was a slight leaning towards Djokovic, obviously, because of his record. But Medvedev was not at the races, it would be fair to say. I think he just could not lock in for the battle. In the key moments that he could get a foot into that final, he just could not get there. And Djokovic was relentless. He was like grinding the Russian into the ground, and his level of defensive tennis was out. He's the best defensive player the game has ever seen. and there's been some great ones. You look at Jim Courier, you look at Andre Agassi, to name a few of the modern era.
Bjorn Borg, for me, the best.
Amazing players,
Yeah,
great athleticism, great back of the court coverage. But Djokovic is better than all of them.
Yeah.
And
Mind you,
I
would have liked to have seen him do it with a smaller racket. Then we could judge them on the same thing. But
it's funny you say that, because an old one of those great highlights reels of McEnroe v Borg came up on my YouTube feed the other day. And look, you've got to watch those and blow it up on the big screen to realise how small those rackets were back in the day.
Mate, you call them squash rackets. We played them as tennis rackets, mate. Listen, always terrific to catch up with you. We wish you every success, because we're hoping, keeping fingers crossed, that they do call you and you do have the opportunity to travel and call the game in the French, in that magnificent city of Paris. Roland Garros, steeped in history. What wouldn't that be, having an Aussie in the heart, along with Darren Cahill? You guys would do a great doubles team, wouldn't you?
Me and Darren Cahill?
You and Darren Cahill?
No, not really. Ironically, when I was a kid in Adelaide, I played Darren Cahill, but I think it was probably donut. But no, he's a good man, Darren. He's a great coach.
Yep.
I'd love to get there, George. I'd love to get to Roland Garros. I hope I do, and I hope Ash Barty gets there.
Yeah.
This year and I reckon, just a quick one on her. I think she learned some really, really important lessons in playing more positive tennis under pressure, in bowing out in that Australian Open. I hope she takes those lessons to bigger moments in her career, because we know she's a fine player. And as she said after the match, she's learning all the time.
Yeah, and she's a class act. Thank you very much, mate. As is David Basheer. Thank you very much for joining us. David Basheer on The Informer, giving us an idea of some of the fallout and what we made of what was, at the end, a successful event that a great many Australians never imagined was going to happen. Thank you very much, David.
Good on you, George.